Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to the 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. On today's visitor segment, my guest is Northwestern play-by-play voice Dave Eanet. In Chicago, he is known as Mr. Cat and has been the radio voice of Wildcat football and basketball for over 25 years. Before Dave joins us, let's take a minute for My View from Section 17 this week. When the season started, not many people thought this game would be the biggest in the conference on the day it was played, or one of the marquee games in the nation this week. But it is. Northwestern opened the season by taking down Stanford and then rolling to an impressive 5-0 start on the season. Michigan and Northwestern are nearly mirror images of each other. Both teams are playing lights-out defense. As a matter of fact, in just about every measurable area of play, these are the best two defenses in college football heading into this weekend. But as Jim Harbaugh said at his Monday presser, these two defenses won't line up against each other on the field. Both Michigan and Northwestern prefer a pounding running game, and both feature a passing attack that is inconsistent. The Wildcats have lost 4 games in a row to Michigan, and they were all heartbreakers to Wildcat fans. These are not the same two teams that met last year at Ryan Field. They are both much improved. Something has to give on Saturday, and for the winner, the boost in confidence will be immeasurable. Dave Eanet thinks this Northwestern defense is the best he's seen in over 20 years. He said the last Northwestern defense this good was back when Coach Pat Fitzgerald was on the field for his alma mater. Dave joins us next here on The Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. With us on our visitor segment this week is Northwestern radio play-by-play voice Dave Eanet. Dave, great to have you back on the show.
Mike, good to be with you.
Well, Northwestern shut out Minnesota on Saturday, 27-0. Dave, second shutout of the year, running their season record to 5-0. Great start. And Dave, any discussion about this team has to begin with that defense. They have played well all year, but they're playing at almost an elite level right now, aren't they?
Yeah, I think they are. I really do think that this defense is playing probably the best defense that's been played at Northwestern in 20 years, since the 1995 season when Pat Fitzgerald was the middle linebacker. And it's funny because a lot of the characteristics of that defense, I think you could see in this one. They were among the leaders in the nation in scoring defense. They were up there in turnover margin. They took the ball away a lot. Their defense scored a lot, and they were tough on third down. And I think you're seeing those same kind of things with this team. Plus, that team ran the ball very well. This team runs the ball extremely well.
Northwestern statistically right up at the top of the heap in the Big Ten, ranked number 1 and number 3 in the nation in scoring defense heading into this week. The Cats have only allowed 35 points in 5 games, which is amazing. And I know the back end is very talented. You have Nick Van Hoos and Matthew Harris back there. But to be this good, you have to get contributions from a lot of other players. Who are some of the names that have emerged on this defense?
Well, I think really the star of this defense has been the middle linebacker, Anthony Walker, and we got a glimpse of him last year. In fact, he really kind of burst onto the scene in the Big Ten opener a year ago when Colin Ellis, who had been playing middle linebacker for Northwestern, actually had to retire from football, and they put Walker in that game. Actually, Ellis was hurt at that point. He hadn't yet retired, but they put Walker in. He started. He had a 49-yard pick six, and he was the Big Ten Freshman of the Week. And, so I think we had an inkling that he could be pretty good as a redshirt freshman. But then he also had some games where, like any freshman, he was kind of looking around I think things were coming pretty fast at him, and he wasn't quite sure of his assignments. And now a year later, he's a guy who really is kind of taking control in the middle of that defense, and especially in the game at Duke, which was, I think, a real good win for them. And he had 19 tackles. He had 14 by halftime. And then this past week, he had a 13-yard fumble return for a touchdown to help put the game away in the fourth quarter. So he's a guy who makes big plays. The guys around him, the other linebackers, Jalen Prater and Drew Smith, who's a senior, I think those guys have really picked their play up, I think partly because of Walker's presence. And then really, Mike, this defensive line has been terrific. They have, I think, not a ton of sacks necessarily to this point. I think they've got 8 or 9 sacks on the year, but they're putting a lot of pressure on opposing quarterbacks. They've stopped the run. And obviously, when you're as good as they are on third down, then your defensive line has something to do about it because you've got those third and short situations where they're shutting teams down. Deontay Gibson and Dean Lowry, the ends, both seniors. Lowry in particular really disrupting opposing offenses, gets his hands up in the passing lanes, knocks down a lot of balls, gets to the quarterback. And, I think these guys have really made a huge difference in this defense.
Was there any idea around the program before this season started that A, this defense could be very good, and B, they could be much better than we expected?
Well, I think there was, but I also think when you look at the preseason publications, it's always important to remember that you're talking about Northwestern, and they are never picked or rarely picked to do anything. And in fact, in 02001, coming off the Big Ten championship, you may remember they were picked to win the Big Ten pretty much unanimously, and that year kind of turned into a disaster for them, but for a variety of reasons. But rarely do they get any credit for anything they've done on either side of the ball, and rarely are they picked to finish in the upper half of the Big Ten. So the fact that national publications weren't talking about them very much, I don't put a lot of stock in that because there are a few who do, who maybe pay attention to some of the things that this team has. If you go back to the last 2 years, they went 5-7 each of the last 2 years. 2 years ago, they were 4-0, and Ohio State came in, and they were right in that game until the final minute, kind of like the Indiana game with Ohio State this past weekend. They just came up a little bit short at the end, and then they lost a couple of key guys for an extended period and went into a prolonged losing streak. Last year, a little bit different situation. Right before the start of camp, they lost 2 key players, and they struggled out of the gate in non-conference play with losses to Cal and Northern Illinois. They never came back from that, even though they had wins over Wisconsin, Penn State. They won at Notre Dame, so they had some nice wins last year. So You're not talking about a team that was 3-9 or 2-10 last year. But having said that, clearly they've made some big strides defensively. This was the ninth-ranked total defense in the Big Ten a year ago. They were ninth in scoring defense. So they've gone from giving up 27 points a game last year to giving up 7. That's a pretty substantial improvement. And I do think that there were people around the program who looked at the guys that you've mentioned in Harrison Van Hoos, Travion Henry, who's played exceptionally well at safety, the linebackers that I mentioned, and especially guys like Dean Lowry, who's going to be an NFL player. And they said, this is a defense that's ready to kind of take the next step.
Last year we saw that Justin Jackson had a great freshman year. On Saturday he had just over 120 yards against Minnesota. I think he's just over 500 for the season so far. Not a big guy, but when you watch him, you can run him between the tackles, and of course you get him on the outside. He's got that speed and is very elusive. He's a heck of a back, Dave.
He is, and you might remember a guy who played here not all that long ago, and Tyrell Sutton.
Mm-hmm.
Not the biggest guy in the world, but a guy who would run between the tackles and also had the speed to get outside. And I've heard this comparison quite a bit with Justin, and Tyrell was a Big Ten freshman of the year, and obviously Justin came in as a freshman, made a huge impact, and he's picked up right where he left off. He's got 10 100-yard games now, his last 12. And what I think is really impressive with him is he carried the ball at Duke 35 times, carried it 33 times the following week against Ball State, only carried it 20 times this past weekend, and still picked up 120 yards. So he's a guy who he doesn't fumble. He can catch the ball coming out of the backfield. He's got that speed. He's a bright kid. Seems to have a good grasp of things, and I think he's going to have a very bright career. And I think one other thing that's going to really help him is that there's some depth behind him, and maybe a little more than they've had in the past here, because guys like Warren Long and Solomon Vault, and I mean, these guys are getting a pretty good number of carries each game. And obviously not the share that Justin's getting, but they're going to get their shots. And I think having A, the competition, and B, the depth where you can give a guy a blow, I think is going to really help Jackson to have even a bigger year this year.
Well, Dave, it was a three-man competition this season, heading into the season, I should say. Quarterback and freshman Clayton Thorson won the job. He ran for 2 scores against Minnesota yesterday, or Saturday, I should say. Playing pretty darn well. Is this about what Pat Fitzgerald expected from him?
That's tough to say. I mean, I think that Pat, what he expected was that this guy would be the guy who gave him the best chance to win. And I don't know whether he thought that he would come out of the box and just light up the Big Ten, or that he would be a guy who could kind of manage the game and make some plays and not turn the ball over. And I tend to think that he was leaning more towards that he was the kind of guy who come in. There was a lot of upside there, and he's made some plays. He's made some mistakes. He's had a few bumps in the road along the way, but you can see him getting better every week. I think, Mike, that's what's really impressive about him is this past week against Minnesota, certainly percentage-wise, completion percentage-wise, he had his best day. Accuracy standpoint, 14 of 19 passing, 128 yards. His longest completion was 19. But he's staying within what they're asking him to do. I don't think they're going to put a ton on his plate right now, although what everybody says about him, what the coaches say, is the guy's got a great football mind. He's got a great grasp of the offense. And it's just kind of a question of getting the experience, getting the reps. But he's a guy who has a chance to be a 4-year starter for them. And the other thing he does is he makes plays with his legs, much like Kane Coulter did for the Wildcats a few years ago, even though I think Thorson would be looked at as more of a traditional quarterback, and Kane was one of those rare guys who really could throw the ball, but he could really make a lot of plays more with his legs. And I think Clayton can do both. He's got good size. Like I say, he's got a good sense for the game. And in this past game, he got the ball to 8 different receivers, which is kind of a hallmark of Northwestern's offense. So I think you can look at him and see him getting better every week. That said, I don't think they're going to ask him to do a ton as far as the passing game, but then again, they haven't really had to come from way behind in a game yet this year, and I think having a defense this good gives them a little bit of breathing room, a little bit of a luxury to let a redshirt freshman quarterback grow into the role a bit.
Well, when you look at this offense, Dave, it hasn't really been, as you said, explosive yet this year. It's been very efficient, and the one statistic that jumped out at me when I was looking at things this morning was they've converted 14 of 17 red zone opportunities. That is a number you just have to like if you're a Cats fan.
Well, you do. What they have not done is convert with touchdowns all that often. They've been field goals, but when you have a dependable field goal kicker, that's okay. You take the points and see what you can get. And I think that's an area they want to be better because they've left a lot of points out there. And in fact, on their first drive Saturday against Minnesota, they took it down, had a first down and goal to go situation, had a false start penalty, ended up having to kick a field goal. It's been something like that, it seems like, every time they get down there. It's not like they're going down there and turning the ball over because, like you say, they have converted 14 of 17, but only 5 touchdowns. But they did get 2 red zone touchdowns against Minnesota. So maybe it's getting to a point where they're going to be, a little more comfortable down there. And also, I mean, I think Michigan's in kind of the same boat. They've sort of had the same thing in terms of kicking field goals in the red zone. So I think it's, again, part of the maturing process for Thorson. And the other factor is that they've had some injuries on the offensive line. They're playing a lot of guys on the offensive line. But sometimes, when you have different guys coming in and out up front, it could throw you off a little bit. But I think as the game went on Saturday, we saw them get better and get more comfortable in those goal-to-go situations.
Well, with us on our visitor segment this week as we get ready for a big game in the Big House on Saturday is Northwestern radio play-by-play voice Dave Eanet. 2 of the best defenses in the country. We know that will be on the field on Saturday. So at least right now, when you try to figure out what might happen on Saturday, points are going to be at a premium.
Well, you would think so. The funny thing about it is, if you remember, Mike, last year when they played at Ryan Field, where they played the last 2 years, what did Michigan win? 10-9. And I think, the year before that, it was also a very low-scoring game that ended up in overtime, triple overtime, 27-19 game. And of course, they had played overtime both in 2012 and 2013. And then last year, Northwestern went for the 2-point try at the end of the game to try to win it, ended up coming up short and losing by 1. But, yeah, I mean, you would think it's a low-scoring game. I think that both of these teams have had their moments offensively where they've looked pretty good, and they've had moments where they've kind of stubbed their toes a little bit. Both the defenses have picked up the offenses. So if you look at it from that standpoint, you've got the number 1 scoring defense in the country, Northwestern. Well, Michigan's number 2 in the country. Got 7 points given up by the Wildcats per game and 7.6 by Michigan. Northwestern's third down defense is outstanding. Michigan's is a little better. They're number 1 in the nation. Northwestern's number 2. So, I really do think both these teams are going to struggle to score on Saturday, and this very well could be a game of field goals.
Well, most of the key players for both Northwestern and Michigan played in last year's game, most of them, but these really are not, obviously, the same 2 teams. And this game, Saturday, big stage, national TV game, a win, especially for Northwestern on the road against Michigan. It's the kind of win that could catapult either team forward confidence-wise for the rest of the season, Dave.
When I look at what's happening with Michigan, I kind of think of what's happening here in Chicago with the Cubs, where they're ahead of schedule a little bit. The Cubs weren't supposed to be in the playoffs this year. It was supposed to be another year or 2 before they had the breakthrough season. And it's kind of like Michigan. I think people knew that Jim Harbaugh would get the program back on track. I'm not sure that people thought that his presence, before he gets his own players in there, his presence was going to make that big a difference this year. So, I kind of look at it as this is a huge chance for Michigan, but Michigan very much on track already. There was a lot of talk about momentum. Northwestern had lost the last two seasons when they went 5-7. Now here they've moved up to, I believe, 13th this week in the AP Top 25. Michigan's 18th. I think if Northwestern goes in there and wins on Saturday, I think they, depending on what else happens this week, may potentially end up a top 10 team, getting the conversation maybe for the playoffs. So, I think this is probably the biggest game that Northwestern has played in several years since, well, at least in a couple of years when Ohio State came in, and college game day was in Evanston, and Northwestern was 4-0 and ranked, and the Buckeyes coming in for a night game, and that was the game where it came down to the end of the game, and Northwestern came up a little bit short on a fourth down. But I think it's a huge game. It's a great stage. Obviously, Michigan playing at home, huge advantage, especially Northwestern coming in there with a redshirt freshman at quarterback. That's going to be a little bit of an eye-opener, I'm sure, for Clayton Thorson on Saturday.
Well, it's going to be interesting. Two ranked teams. I can't remember the last time, Dave, these two teams have played each other and been ranked so highly at this stage of the season.
Well, I think probably if you go back, I was going to say 2012, I don't think Michigan wasn't ranked and Northwestern wasn't ranked till the end of the season. So Northwestern was ranked for the beginning of the 2013 season, but by the time they played Michigan, they were out of that. So, yeah, it's been a while. There's no question. Probably you would have to go back to the game in 2000, the 54-51 game at Ryan Field, when Michigan was ranked 12th and Northwestern was ranked 21st, and the Wildcats won that crazy game in Evanston. So, that's 15 years ago. So it's been quite some time.
Well, it's going to be a lot of fun. Big game, big stage for these young guys on Saturday in the Big House. Our guest here on our visitor segment this week has been the radio play-by-play voice of Northwestern football and basketball, Dave Eanet. Dave, always appreciate you taking time to come on the show and look forward to Saturday.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mike. Always good being with you.
An injury update and some game day notes is next on Wolverine Quick Hits, here on the Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V-Sporto Network and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. On Wolverine Quick Hits today, Davion Smith has been practicing all week and should be ready to go on Saturday. Channing Stribling is also expected back this weekend. Joe Carriage is still considered day-to-day. Mario Ojemudia, as we learned earlier this week, is done for the year with an Achilles injury. Nothing else major on the injury front to report at this time, at least that we know of. Michigan has an all-time record of 55-15-2 against Northwestern. The Cats won the first game ever played between these two teams 10-8 back on October 29, 1892 in Chicago. Michigan held on last year in Evanston, winning 10-9. Pat Fitzgerald is 60-53 as head coach, and he is now in his 10th year as head man. They were 5-7 last year, 3-5 in Big Ten play, returned 16 starters, 6 on offense, 8 on D, and 2 special teams players. Their last bowl appearance was in the 2013 Gator Bowl against Mississippi, where they won 34-20. The weatherman says we should have good football weather for the 3:30 p.m. kickoff. Cloudy skies and temps in the 60s. We all know, though, that can change with very short notice. Thanks again to Northwestern Radio play-by-play voice Dave Eanet for being our guest today. It should be a humdinger of a game on Saturday in the Big House, and it's also homecoming. So if you're heading to the game, get there early and enjoy all of the pregame festivities. We'll be back next Tuesday to recap the Northwestern game and then look ahead to a huge matchup with our neighbors from East Lansing. So I hope you'll join us for that. Like us on Facebook at The Michigan Man Podcast, follow us on Twitter at The Michigan Man, and you can also follow Wolverine Sports Radio at Go Blue Radio on Twitter. Our free show apps are available from the iTunes Store, Google Play Store, and Windows 8 App Store. As always, my listener lines are open for your calls 24/7 at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. You can also email me at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com, and I would love to hear from you. That will do it for this week. Enjoy the game on Saturday, and have a great Wolverine week, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Until next time, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V-Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!